The Baal Shem Tov is going to share with us a few mind-blowing elements, which we'll tap into, hopefully, as we lead up to Shavuos. And what I want to tap into tonight is the secret and the depth that the Baal Shem Tov shares with us in one of the most vital components of connection. So let's start off with the source that is on paragraph Ayin Aleph 71. It says the following: V'gam shamati mishamai zeichet tzadik lebracha. I also heard from the Baal Shem Tov himself, she'im adam mukhrach ledaber im chaverei, that if a person has to speak to his friend, or she needs to speak to her friend, what that means is mukhrach, yeah? You're not really interested in the conversation. You're not interested in the topic. You're not interested in even being there. Yeah, we all have those moments. We're not interested. Or it's something referred to as Devoran Alma, which means it seems like they're elements. It seems like they're elements which are not interesting in the sense that they're Devoran Alma. They seem to be not only irrelevant, but they seem to be a waste of time, just idle chatter. And a person, especially within a spiritual context or a spiritually minded person, one of the things they hate the most is chitter-chatter or small talk. Yeah, they hate small talk. When you come to people, you don't want to, you want to get straight to the crux of the matter. How you doing? You're not interested in, I'm good. Tell me really how you doing. You want to know properly, how you feeling, what's going on. Let's get to the meat and potatoes. But sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes in your experience of something, it's just not coming out. Now check out what he says here. Yuchal la'aloisoi gam kein alidei sheyitain dasoi ki ashmiya hu alidei haneshama. I mean, this is the most amazing concept. He says that you in your existential vacuumed lacking experience of this moment where you feel that there's nothing to really take from the nutrition of this experience. Maybe it's the topic, maybe it's the person, maybe it's what they're speaking about, how they're speaking. What are you meant to do? He says, you are able, la'aloisoi, you are able to uplift the individual you're talking to and yourself and the experience through doing one thing. You know what it is? Sheyitain dasoi. To become overly mindful, to become overly present. And what are you being mindful and present to? Ki hashmiya hu alidei haneshama. It's a reference to the listening. That simply entering into 100% unadulterated listening. That nothing else is swimming around in your head. You're not looking around in any state. You are totally experiencing the listening of that moment, fully in the listening of that experience. He says what you're essentially doing through that is you tap into the neshama itself. Why? Because listening, he says, comes from the neshama. So when you're in a state of total listening, total presence of listening, I'm present and I'm listening, there is a state of experiencing the soul, which comes from a portion of Hashem. And you have that intention when you're engaging with your friend, you're engaging with a conversation. Have intention just to be present and fully listening to what's taking place. And you're able to uplift yourself through that experience. Now, it's a very unique concept here. as we have a therapist with us, maybe a few more here as well in the group. But one of the most unique therapies is that an individual sits there totally without judgment and listens, totally present in the experience and listening. How is that therapeutic in any way? I mean, what? I can talk to a wall. The walls may be listening to me as well. What value is it? What do you experience through just vexing your complaints or concerns to another person? And it's not from the fact that they've given you any advice. It's not from the fact that they've even said anything to you. Just by virtue of the fact that the individual is listening to you, 100%. There is something therapeutic within that experience. What is that? What the Baal Shem Tov has revealed to us is that the strength of listening is that it is essentially and inextricably linked to the neshama. That the soul of a person is revealed through virtue of their listening, being present, listening to the sound. Now, what is amazing about this is it doesn't only apply to our engagement with people. It doesn't only apply to our conversations. It applies to any circumstance where an individual is sensing or feeling spiritually lackluster. One of the deepest frameworks of galvanizing that spiritual energy within their experience of the world is through honing into the essence of listening. That if you're feeling uninspired, pause and listen to the sounds, 100% of what's going on around you. Can you hear the birds chirping? Can you hear the sounds in the street? Hopefully it's not your neighbors fighting. What is it that you're able to hone into just from sound? And that sound is able to rehabilitate the neshama. Very, very powerful aspect of connection with people and the connection of self. Let's put it over to you guys there. That's the teaching for today. Anyone have a question, a statement, a concept they want to share with us? How do you feel about this, especially to our therapists here in the room?
For me,
yes,
when you talk of active listening, the way one differentiates, and I often explain this to my students when I'm lecturing them about active listening and listening, is that often when we just listen, we listen with judgment. So you're judging what that person is saying all the time. But when you use unconditional positive regard in your listening, you're actually listening. You're not making a judgment as you go. So therefore that listening is more intense, because that's all you're doing is listening. You're not judging that person while you're listening. I can see their teeth, or are they telling me the truth, or is this really what's happening? When one does that, you don't listen. But when you listen with unconditional positive regard, that is when it really, you hear.
Yeah. And it's a very difficult thing, because what the ego loves to do in our experience of listening is to be judgmental.
Yeah.
What are they saying? Do I agree with what they're saying? Do I agree with them? Do I connect to them? Etc., etc. But essentially, through that judgmental approach, a person is closing themselves off from the essential experience of the neshama. And so they walk away from their relationships feeling starved of connection, because it's always a state of judgment. It's never just a state of presence, to the extent that if you speak to someone and then someone asks you, so what did you think about that person? Most people would already formulated their judgment of that person. But what we're learning here is the power of listening, and the spiritual component, which is essentially, listening is essentially connected to that spiritual component, is defined by the ability of listening without judgment, of totally being present in the full experience of that listening. And more than it does to uplift the other individual, it allows an individual themselves to tap into their neshama, to tap into their soul. Very powerful, simple, but very powerful concept an earth-shattering reality that we experience from this. Yeah, anyone else? Thank you for that, sharing that, Carol.
Yeah, can I just add to what Carol was saying? Also, I don't know if you guys have heard of Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a Buddhist monk from Vietnam. And he says an interesting thing, and he says that deep listening or compassionate listening actually brings along a relief of suffering, but also healing. And that's in essence what happens when you really sit and listen to somebody without judgment, without whatever. You're just listening, just focusing on that person and their issues. And you really see it. You really see it. And also that's the feedback that one gets, is that because you listened, I was actually able to in a sense, either heal myself or at least feel some sense of relief of what I'm suffering with.
Yeah. Thank you. So when is your therapy center open? We need to know the times to be in touch with you. These are important.
It's 24 hours a day. I'm
24 hours a day, we can call you. Okay, beautiful. So just to conclude here, if we have any further questions, but what we've understood, we'll just bring Jenny into this final conclusion here, and then we'll hear from Gracias.
Yes.
1 second, my friend, and then we'll just recap, and then we'll conclude with the question from you. Is what we've understood is in our experience of life, in just the simple presence of experience without judgment. What we're seeing here, that experience, especially sound and listening, is inextricably linked to the neshama. That through listening without judgment, a person is able to really tap into the soul, and they uplift themselves as well as bring a healing and upliftment to the individual that they're listening to as well. Very powerful and simple but profound concept from the Baal Shem Tov. Yes, gracias.
Yes, I wanted to ask this level of listening without judging, because it's challenging for me personally. In a situation that, for instance, you have received facts before listening, and the facts are pointing in a direction that the person you're listening to is, let me be judgmental for the sake of making my point, is lying. How then will listening to lies maybe elevate your spirituality at the same time as the person who is lying to you?
Yeah. So very, very good point you're making here, Gracias. So I'll give you an example. This morning, just after a teaching, my daughter ran into the room, and she was very upset because her online class, went offline, and she was completely lost, she was very troubled, very upset. And she was sad. I said to her, like, what's going on? Like, why you feel like this? What's happening? She says to me, she's worried about her work, and she's worried about this, and she's going to fall behind with this and that. And I knew that really what she was talking about, there was not much consequence, and she herself knew it as well. So I wouldn't call that lying. It's not lying. But still, I was present with her, and I listened to her, and I was there with her, and I tried to understand her. And more than I tried to be with what she was, actually the facts that she was saying, I was being with her and holding her in the experience and listening to her without judging what she was saying, but being present. And then in a couple of seconds, the frown and the tears turned to a smile, and there was a connection immediately. And she felt held. And I said, let's try and, come back there and switch the computer back on. We'll see what we need to do, and we'll fix it. And she was fine. So often when you're seeing someone that's lying, try and look beyond even what the individual is saying, and try and experience the listening behind what that person is saying. Where are they coming from? Where's their trouble? You can sense something there. And even through being present, the person will feel, I don't even need to lie to you anymore. Sometimes there'll be a clarification of what they're saying even before they're finished. So what we're understanding here, obviously, we can't always be in the state of just, listening in that way. Obviously, sometimes there are conversations where you have to be engaged, and you have to often, somewhat be clarifying what's being said. But what we're seeing here is that there's a deep spiritual experience with the concept of unadulterated listening and presence, okay? Where a person is able to really bring a experience of spirituality through the form of simple listening, total presence in that experience, not only with people, but with what's around oneself as well, to sensitize themselves to the sounds that's around them without judgment, as Carol was sharing with us, yeah? Just totally being present. So this is the teaching here from the Baal Shem Tov. We'll share another one tomorrow on similar contexts. We'll email it to you, Alfonso, no worry. And any other further questions here before we conclude? Statements? Okay, wonderful. Guys, have a beautiful, beautiful evening. One of connectivity and a lot of blessing. All the best, guys. Thank you for joining us. And for those who aren't on the Oasis group, please be in touch with Jenny for a link, or with myself. We're happy to have you on board. We teach every day in the morning and afternoon. All the best and lots of bracha. Bye-bye.